Hello everyone, welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. The lenses were everywhere, lurking in the mantle's carved grooves, nestled within the weave of a wall tapestry, even glinting from the leaves of a potted fern. At first I dismissed it as nerves, a trick of the mind in an unfamiliar place. But by the fifth day, certainty gripped me. Someone was tracking my every breath, my every step. It was meant to be a simple favor. My university friends' parents, the Hawthorns, needed someone to mind their quaint seaside cottage while they sailed off for a month-long Mediterranean adventure. The pay was generous, the cottage charming, with its weathered shingles and ocean view porch, and I'd have uninterrupted hours to polish my dissertation. A perfect arrangement, or so I thought. How wrong I was. The first few days passed like a dream. I fell into a rhythm, rise with the dawn, brew tea in the kettle's soft whistle, work at the oak table with gulls crying outside, and if the sun was kind, take a dip in the cove below the cliff. It was idyllic, almost too perfect. But on the fourth night, a prickle of dread began to stir. Sitting by the hearth with a book, I'd feel eyes boring into me, urging me to glance behind. In the clawfoot tub, I'd swear I heard floorboards creak beyond the curtain. I told myself it was the isolation, the creaks of an old house, nothing more. Yet the sensation grew, a weight that pressed heavier each day. Then I found the first lens. I was polishing the mantle. Yes, I took my duties seriously. When I noticed a peculiarity in a framed watercolor of the coast. The frame felt too bulky, its edges uneven. Curious, I lifted it down and froze. There, embedded in the wood, was a tiny glass eye, no larger than a seed, staring back. My pulse hammered as the truth sank in. Those moments of unease weren't imagined. They were orchestrated. Heart racing, I tore through the cottage. Within an hour, I'd uncovered 7 more devices, one in the parlor's chandelier, another in the kitchen's spice rack, one in my bedroom's headboard, and, most chillingly, one in the bathroom, peering from the grout of the tiled wall. Someone had woven a web of surveillance, capturing every corner of this house. But why? And who? I considered calling the sheriff, but what could I say? That I'd found cameras in a cottage I was caretaking. For all I knew, the Hawthorns had installed them for security, though their cunning placement suggested otherwise. I needed answers before I raised alarms. I needed to know who was pulling the strings. The next day I played the part of the oblivious guest, sticking to my routine while my mind churned. I sipped tea, typed at my laptop, and swam in the cove, all while cataloging the camera's positions and searching for patterns. They were wireless, likely feeding to a hub nearby. If I could find that hub, I might trace it to the watcher. As dusk fell, I set my plan in motion. I turned on every radio and television, cranking the volume to a cacophony of news and static, masking my movements. Then I began my search, room by room, silent as a shadow. The cellar was empty, its stone walls bare. The ground floor offered nothing but driftwood decor. By the time I reached the upper floor, doubt crept in. Then I saw it, a trapdoor in the hallway ceiling, its edge slightly askew, as if hastily closed. Pulse pounding, I tugged the cord, lowering a rickety ladder. Each groan of the wood sent a jolt through me. What awaited above? Worse, would someone be waiting? I climbed, senses razor sharp, into a dim, musty attic cluttered with trunks and forgotten furniture. In the far corner, a faint green glow pulsed. Creeping closer, I found it. A laptop linked to a cluster of monitors. each displaying a room of the cottage. There I was, frozen on one screen, standing in the attic, bathed in the eerie light of my own discovery. I'd found the nerve center. Now I needed to know who it served. The laptop was locked, its screen demanding a password. I'm no tech savant, but I checked the browser history. Most of it was wiped, but a few fragments remained. Searches for my name, my university profile, my old blog posts. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't about the cottage. It was about me. Whoever was watching had chosen me as their prey. A car door slammed outside. Panic seized me. I darted to the attic's small window, peering through the grime. A shadowed figure approached the cottage, their steps deliberate. I had to move. Scrambling down the ladder, I ignored the noise, grabbing my phone and wallet from the bedroom. I bolted for the stairs, but the front door creaked open. I froze, one foot on the top step. Heavy boots thudded in the entryway, slow and certain. They knew I was here. My mind raced. The back door was bolted. I'd never reach it. The windows were too high. I was cornered on the second floor. The boots began climbing the stairs. In a surge of desperation, I slipped into the master bedroom, locking the door behind me. It was a flimsy barrier, but it might buy time. I heard them in the hall testing knobs. It wouldn't be long before they reached me. The window was my only hope. I flung it open, the salty night air hitting my face. Below, the cliff sloped toward the cove, a perilous drop, but a narrow ledge of shingles jutted out, leading to a lower roof. If I could reach it, I might make it to the beach. The doorknob rattled. A heavy thud shook the frame. No time left. I climbed onto the sill, the wood slick under my hands. Another thud splintered the door. I took a breath and let go. The shingles scraped my skin as I slid, clawing for control. I hit the lower roof, teetering, then tumbled the final feet into the cove's shallow waves. The icy water stole my breath, but I surfaced, gasping. Shouts echoed from the cottage. They knew I'd escaped. Soaked and trembling, I staggered to the cliff's base, finding a path to the road. I ran, the sea roaring beside me, until I reached a weathered diner glowing in the dark. The waitress, her face lined with concern, took one look at my drenched, wild-eyed state and reached for the phone. "Sweetheart, you okay?" she asked. I nodded, choking out, "I need the police." The hours that followed blurred into chaos. I spilled everything to the deputies. The cameras, the attic, the intruder. They were dubious at first, but my urgency must have swayed them. A team swept the cottage, finding the cameras. The monitors exactly as I've described. But the intruder? Gone, swallowed by the night. The Hawthorns, reached by a satellite phone in Greece, swore they knew nothing of any surveillance. The investigation dragged on, yielding no answers. Whoever had watched me had vanished, leaving only questions. I couldn't stay alone after that. I moved in with a friend, jumping at every creak, flinching at every headlight. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by nightmares of unseen eyes. The question that gnawed at me was simple yet unanswerable. Why me? What had drawn this shadow to me? And were they still out there biding their time? The world feels different now, its edges sharper, its shadows deeper. I survived, yes, and that's a kind of victory. But safety is a fragile thing, and I'm not sure I'll ever trust it again. Still, I press forward, because what else can I do? They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I hope that's true. I just pray I never have to prove it again. Ikiomon. The moment I saw his silhouette against the rain-slashed road, thumb raised like a beacon, I knew I should have driven past. But the storm was a beast, clawing at my windshield, and something in his slumped posture pulled at my heart. That choice would haunt me, a splinter lodged in my soul for years to come. It was well past midnight, and I was weaving home through the back roads of Black Hollow after a grueling shift at the county hospital. The highway unfurled before me, a ribbon of black swallowed by the deluge. Exhaustion weighed on my bones, the kind that seeps in after 16 hours of stitching wounds and soothing fears. Maybe that's why I missed the warning in the air, the electric hum of danger. I saw him on the roadside, a lone figure barely visible through the sheets of rain, his coat plastered to his lean frame. As I eased off the gas, he turned, his face catching the headlights, a flicker of desperation that seemed to plead for rescue. I cracked the passenger window, rain spitting inside. "Where are you headed?" I called over the storm's roar. "Just a few miles up," he answered, his voice soft, almost lost in the wind. "Car broke down, trying to reach town. I'd owe you big for a lift." I hesitated, my gut whispering to keep moving, to leave this stranger to the night. But the rain was merciless, and the thought of abandoning someone in this chaos felt cruel. "Hop in," I said, unlocking the door. He slid into the seat, bringing the scent of sodden wool and something sharper, metallic, like old coins. "Thanks, friend," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're a saint." I pulled back onto the road, wipers battling the flood. "I'm Clara," I offered, trying to break the silence that settled like fog between us. "Eli," he replied, rubbing his hands as if to chase the chill. Not many would stop on a night like this. We drove in quiet, the storm's rhythm, swish thud, filling the void. I stole glances at Eli when the road allowed. He was younger than I'd first thought, maybe mid-20s, with sharp cheekbones and a boyish air beneath the wear of his clothes. "So, what happened to your rig?" I asked, more to keep myself awake than out of curiosity. He shrugged, staring into the rain. "Old Clunker finally quit. Was hoping to make it to my brother's place, but..." His voice trailed off, his gaze fixed on the dark beyond the glass. Something in his tone felt off, like a note played wrong. But I blamed my fatigue and focused on the road. We'd gone maybe 10 miles when Eli spoke again. "Mind if we take a shortcut? There's a turn coming up, cuts through the pines. It'll get us there faster." I frowned. "Thought you were headed to town?" "Yeah, my brother's just outside it," he said, his eyes still on the road. "This way's quicker, trust me." Against the knot in my stomach, I took the turn he pointed out. The road narrowed, twisting through a tunnel of gnarled pines. The storm seemed to thicken, rain hammering the roof like fists. "You sure this is right?" I asked, unease blooming into anxiety. Eli nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Just a bit further." We drove on, the trees closing in, their branches scraping the car like claws. I was about to insist on turning back when Eli's voice cut through the dark. "Pull over here." I slowed, squinting through the drenched windshield. There was nothing but forest, an endless wall of shadow. "There's nothing here." My words choked off as I felt something cold and sharp press against my side. I turned, slow as a nightmare, to see Eli holding a blade, its edge glinting in the dashboard's glow. The warmth in his face was gone, replaced by a predator's calm. "Kill the engine," he said, his voice low and lethal. "Hand over the keys." My heart thundered, drowning out the storm. With trembling hands, I obeyed, the keys clinking as I dropped them into his palm. "Now get out," he ordered. I opened the door, rain lashing my face as I stepped into the mud. Eli followed, the knife never wavering. "What do you want?" I managed, my voice a threadbare whisper. His smile was a slash of cruelty. "Everything you've got. Wallet, phone, that watch. Then we're taking a walk." I handed over my belongings, my mind scrambling for an escape. We were miles from help, lost in a storm's embrace. Eli gestured with the knife toward the trees. "Move!" I stumbled through the underbrush, branches snagging my scrubs, mud sucking at my sneakers. Eli stayed close, the knife's tip prodding my back when I slowed. After what felt like an eternity but was likely 20 minutes, We reached a clearing. A sagging shack loomed ahead, its windows black as dead eyes. Inside, Eli commanded, shoving me toward the door. The shack reeked of damp rot, its floorboards groaning underfoot. A flickering lantern sat on a warped table, casting jagged shadows across mold-streaked walls. "Sit," Eli said, pointing to a chair in the corner. I sank into it, my legs like water. He pulled rope from a tattered bag I hadn't noticed before. "Hands behind you." As he bound me, I found my voice. "Why are you doing this?" Eli tightened the knots, stepping back to study me. "Why does anyone do anything?" he said, twirling the knife with a practiced flick. "Money, control, survival, take your pick." He paced the small space, his movements restless, almost theatrical. "People like you, Clara, bleeding hearts, they're the easiest, so eager to help, so blind. Makes my work a breeze." "Your work?" I echoed, dread pooling in my chest. His grin was a blade's edge. "Oh yeah, this ain't my first dance. But don't worry, you're not special. Just another mark in the wrong place at the wrong time." My mind reeled. How many others had sat in this chair, bound and helpless? What had become of them? "What's next?" I asked, fearing the answer. Eli leaned against the wall, casual as if we were chatting over coffee. "Depends on you. First, we'll call your bank, have you drain your accounts into mine. Then we'll hit your cards, maybe pull some loans. Squeeze every drop out of you." He paused, his eyes boring into mine. "After that, you get a choice. You can vanish. Start fresh somewhere far away. Keep your mouth shut. Or," he let the word hang, heavy with threat. The weight of my situation crashed over me. This man would strip me bare, my money, my future, maybe my life. And I was powerless to stop him. As if sensing my despair, Eli chuckled. "Don't get any bright ideas. Even if you slip these ropes, which you won't, you're in the middle of nowhere. You'd never make it through these woods." He turned to rummage in his bag. I tested the ropes, but they were tight, the knots unyielding. Escape seemed impossible. Eli returned, holding my phone. "Let's get to it. What's your bank's number?" What followed was a nightmare of transactions, each one bleeding my life away. Under the knife's shadow, I called my bank, maxed out cards, applied for loans I'd never repay. With every transfer, I felt my future dissolve. By the end, I was hollow, drained in every sense. Eli hummed, pleased, as he packed away my phone. "Well, Clara, you've been a model guest," he said, his tone almost warm. "Makes me almost regret what comes next." He approached, knife gleaming. I braced for the end, but instead, he sliced the ropes. "Remember the choice," he said, stepping back. "That door leads to the woods. If you're lucky, you might find your way out, or..." He nodded to the knife, now resting on the table. "You can try to fight. I wouldn't." With that, he grabbed his bag and strode to the door. "Oh, and Clara, wait an hour before you move. Safer that way." Then he was gone, the shack swallowing the sound of his steps. I sat, numb, the rain's drone my only companion. How long? I don't know. When I finally staggered out, the sky was gray with dawn. The woods were a maze, but I walked, driven by survival. 6 hours later, I stumbled onto a gravel road. Eli was long gone, along with my car, my money, everything. The sheriff's deputies were kind but grim. Men like Eli, they said, were ghosts skilled at vanishing. They'd search, but the odds were thin. Months later, I'm still rebuilding. My credit's ruined, my savings dust. I flinch at every stranger's glance, distrust every offer of help. But I'm alive, piecing together a new life, brick by painful brick. The lesson is carved into me. The most dangerous wolves wear human skin, their smiles sharper than any blade. I drive now, but never at night, and never alone. Because somewhere out there, Eli or someone like him is waiting, watching for the next saint to save. The moment I saw the torn canvas of that abandoned camp, streaked with crimson, I knew my retreat had become a nightmare. What I couldn't yet grasp was that I'd stumbled into a hunter's game, with me as the quarry, racing through a forest that hid more than shadows. I'd craved this escape for months. Work had been a furnace, burning my days and nights on a relentless project. When it finally ended, I needed to breathe, to find myself again. A solo trek through the Ironwood Range seemed the perfect cure. Just me, my pack, and miles of untamed pines. I'd camped before, but always with others, laughter echoing around the fire. This time I wanted solitude, the kind that stitches the soul back together. The idea thrilled me, though a thread of unease tugged at my heart. I chose a remote clearing, a day's hike from the nearest ranger post, where autumn had begun to paint the forest in ember and gold. The air was sharp, scented with resin and earth. The trek in was grueling but glorious, my muscles singing with effort by the time I reached my spot, a glade cradled by a whispering creek. I pitched my tent, kindled a small fire, and watched the stars emerge, feeling the weight of the world dissolve. That first night was a gift, my sleep deep and unbroken, lulled by the forest's soft pulse. The next day I roamed, snapping photos of moss-draped stones and fleeting deer, drinking in the silence. It was everything I'd hoped for, a severance from the clamor of life. As dusk crept in, I headed back to camp, eager for another night under the canopy. That's when the air changed. A sour chemical tang cut through the pine scent, like bleach spilled in a meadow. It was wrong, jarring, a note that didn't belong. The forest grew still, the chatter of birds and bugs snuffed out. My instincts screamed caution, my steps slowing as I neared my camp. Everything looked as I'd left it, tent upright, gear untouched. But then I saw them, fresh boot prints in the soft earth by my fire, too large to be mine. My pulse quickened. Someone had been here while I was gone. But who and why? I scanned the trees, debating whether to flee. Then in the distance, voices, low, clipped, growing closer. Without thinking, I dove behind a fallen log, peering through the ferns. Two figures emerged across the glade, clad in dark jackets and heavy boots, each hauling a bulky duffel. They moved with purpose, as if the forest were their domain. "This'll do," one said, dropping his bag with a metallic clunk. "Far enough from the trails, but we can get in and out." The other nodded, eyes sweeping the clearing. "Let's set up. We need to be running by dark." They unzipped their bags and my blood turned to frost. Out came jugs of liquid, coils of tubing, a portable stove, tools of a makeshift lab, the kind I'd seen in crime documentaries. I'd stumbled onto a drug operation hidden deep in the ironwood. My mind raced. I needed to get to the Rangers, to sound the alarm, but I was pinned as any move risking discovery. These men weren't amateurs. They'd kill to keep their secret. So I stayed, barely breathing as they assembled their setup, the chemical stench thickening, stinging my eyes. Hours dragged by, the sun sinking, shadows stretching like claws. My body ached from stillness, but fear kept me rooted. As night fell, more figures arrived, 3 more. Their faces hard, their movements precise. They spoke in murmurs, plotting routes and deals, details of a sprawling network. I was overhearing the heart of a criminal empire, and I was the only witness. Then I shifted, easing a cramp, and a twig snapped under my knee. The sound was a gunshot in the silence. The clearing froze. "What was that?" one man hissed, his hand dropping to his belt, where a pistol's outline gleamed. "Probably a deer," another muttered, but his voice was tight. "Check it," the first ordered. "No risks." 2 men moved toward me, flashlights slicing the dark. I knew I was seconds from discovery. Heart pounding, I exploded from my hiding spot, sprinting for the trees. Shouts erupted, boots pounding behind me. I ran blindly, branches lashing my face, roots snaring my feet. A gunshot cracked, the bullet whistling past to thud into a trunk. Terror drove me faster, adrenaline burning away exhaustion. But they were gaining, their knowledge of the terrain outmatching my panic. Ahead, the ground sloped sharply, the roar of water rising. The creek must feed a river nearby. A desperate plan formed. I veered toward the sound, pushing my body to its breaking point. Another shot sparked off a rock, too close. Then the trees parted, revealing a gorge. The river below, churning white in the moonlight, 30 feet down. No time to think. As a bullet grazed the air, I leapt. The fall was endless, then the water hit like a fist, stealing my breath. The current seized me, tumbling me through its icy grip. I fought to the surface, gasping, then surrendered to the flow, keeping my head above water. Time blurred, minutes, maybe hours. The river slowed, depositing me on a rocky shore. I lay there shivering, coughing, too spent to move. When strength returned, I stood, lost in the wilderness, my pack gone, my bearings shattered. But I was alive, free from those men. I chose a direction and walked, following the river's curve, knowing it would lead to civilization. 2 days of scavenging berries and sipping from the current brought me to a trail. Another day and I staggered into a ranger station, my clothes torn, my story spilling out in a frantic rush. The rangers listened, shocked, and called in the state police and DEA. A manhunt swept the Ironwood, but the lab was gone, leaving only traces, empty jugs, trampled earth. My account fueled a wider investigation, cracking open a drug network spanning the Northwest. Arrests followed, but the men I'd seen, the core of the operation, slipped away like smoke. Years later, the nightmares persist. I'm running through an endless forest, the crunch of pursuit at my heels. I camp still, but never alone, and never without a group's safety. The wilderness, once my refuge, now carries a shadowed edge. Every rustle, every glimpse of movement sets my heart racing. Logically, I know those men are unlikely to find me again, but fear laughs at logic. In my dreams, I smell that chemical tang, feel eyes in the dark. They say survival forges strength, but I'm not so sure. What I do know is this. I endured, and each day since is a hard-won gift. The pines taught me a brutal truth. Beauty can cloak horror, and the wild holds hunters who walk on 2 legs, their purpose colder than any beast's. So if you're ever deep in the woods and find a camp abandoned or feel a gaze from the shadows, don't ignore the chill in your gut. It might be the only thing keeping you from becoming prey. The moment the phone lit up at 1:17 a.m., I knew my quiet shift had tilted into something sinister. I was staring at the studio clock, its hands crawling toward dawn, begging time to hasten so I could escape the monotony. I never should have answered, but I did. And that choice opened the door to a nightmare that still haunts my every silence. My name's Lena, and I helm the graveyard shift at WSHD, a small radio station perched on the edge of Willow Creek, a town so forgotten it barely registers on maps. It's a simple gig. Spin records, take requests, fight the urge to doze. Most nights, the challenge is staying awake in the glow of the soundboard, with only the parking lot's lone street lamp for company. This was no ordinary night. The shift began as always. I clocked in at midnight, waved off the evening DJ, and settled into my domain. A cramped booth with flickering monitors and a window framing the empty lot. I queued up a playlist of Springsteen, Fleetwood Mac, and Tom Petty sprinkled with local ads for diners and tire shops. The first 2 hours drifted by, uneventful, the phone silent, the music my only companion. Then at 1:17 a.m., the request line flared to life. I answered with my usual patter. "You're live on WSHD. What's your tune tonight?" Silence greeted me, heavy and deliberate. Just as I reached to hang up, a slow, measured breath hissed through the line. "Hello?" I said, a prickle of unease stirring. "Anyone there?" A man's voice answered, low and rasping, like wind through dead leaves. "Play something for me." The words carried a strange weight, as if testing me. "Sure," I replied, forcing cheer. "What's your pick?" "Surprise me," he said, and the line went dead. I shook it off. Late night callers can be odd, drunks, insomniacs, or pranksters looking for a laugh. I spun Born to Run, its chords filling the booth, and returned to scrolling my phone. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again, the same number glowing. "WSHD, what's up?" I said, a touch wary. "You've got a knack," the voice said, unmistakably the same man. "That was a good one. What else you got?" A chill skittered down my spine. His tone was too intimate, like he was sitting just beyond the glass. Glad you liked it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Any requests?" "I trust you," he replied and hung up. Now I was rattled. I glanced out the window, half expecting a figure in the lot, but only my battered Civic sat under the stuttering lamp. I played Rhiannon to soothe my nerves, its melody a fragile shield. As the song faded, the phone rang again. I stared at it, my hand frozen. Duty won out. Ignoring calls wasn't an option. "WSHD, I said, my voice trembling. "I can see why folks tune in," the man said, his tone sharper now, predatory. "The way you pick the tracks, the way your voice curls around the words, it's mesmerizing." My blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" I demanded. He chuckled, a sound like gravel underfoot. "Just a fan, Lena, a devoted one." He knew my name. We never used real names on air. I was Midnight Sparrow to listeners. How did he know? "Look," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "I don't know what your deal is, but this isn't funny. Stop calling." "Oh, I'll call again," he said, his voice ablade. "I'm closer than you think, Lena. I'm watching." The line died. My hands shook as I set the receiver down. The booth, once a cozy refuge, felt like a fishbowl, the windows exposing me to unseen eyes. I tried to rationalize it, a creep with too much time, getting his kicks. But the weight of his words clung to me. I played the next hour on autopilot, jumping at every creak, peering into the dark beyond the glass. The phone stayed silent, but the quiet was worse, a coiled snake waiting to strike. At 3:02 a.m., it rang again. I answered, saying nothing. "You should be more careful, Lena," the voice purred, calm and venomous. "You never know who's listening or watching." "What do you want?" I whispered, dread choking me. "To play a game," he said. "It's easy. I give you 2 songs. Pick the right one and nothing happens. Pick wrong and, well, let's say the consequences won't be pleasant." My mind spun. This wasn't real. It was a movie, a fever dream. But the fear was visceral, clawing at my chest. "I'm hanging up," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I'm calling the cops." "I wouldn't," he snapped, his tone icing over. "Not if you want your brother to stay safe. Daniel, isn't it? Lives on Maple Drive. Little green bungalow. Be a shame if something happened." My heart stopped. How did he know about Danny? How did he know his house? "Leave him out of this," I croaked. "That's on you," he said. "Play the game, and everyone's fine. Refuse, and you know what's at stake." I closed my eyes, trapped. It had to be a bluff, but could I risk it? "Fine," I said, defeated. "What's the game?" "Smart girl," he purred. "Let's start simple. Paint it black or Bad Moon Rising. Pick." I scrambled, searching for a trap. Was there a right choice? Was he toying with me? "Bad Moon Rising," I said, my voice thin. A pause, stretched, endless. "Good call," he said at last. "Play it." My hands fumbled as I cued the song. its ominous chords filling the booth. I was holding my breath, I realized, as if waiting for a blow. "Very good, Lena," he said when I picked up again. "You're a natural. Ready for round two?" For 2 hours, the game dragged on. He'd call, offer 2 songs, and I'd choose, sometimes with cryptic hints, sometimes with nothing but his mocking tone. Each choice felt like a step on a tightrope, one slip-spelling disaster. By 5 a.m., I was a wreck, my shirt damp with sweat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the controls. But I'd chosen correctly every time, clinging to that thin thread of survival. The phone rang for the final time. "You've done well, Lena," he said, his voice almost proud. "But now it's the last round. Get this right and we're done. Get it wrong and you know what happens." I swallowed, my throat dry as ash. "What's the choice? Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper or Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks? Choose wisely." I froze. Both songs carried death's shadow, one a dance with mortality, the other a flood of ruin. Was there a clue I'd missed? My mind raced, grasping for meaning. In the end, I trusted my gut. "When the levee breaks," I whispered. The silence that followed was a chasm, my pulse thundering in my ears. Finally, he spoke. "Congratulations. Lena, you've won." Relief crashed over me, sharp and dizzying. "It's over?" I asked, barely believing. "For now," he said, and I heard the smile in his voice. "You're a worthy player. I look forward to our next game." The line went dead, final and cold. I sat stunned as dawn's first light crept through the window. The night was done, but the dread lingered, a stain I couldn't wash out. When the morning DJ arrived, I could barely sign off, my hands still trembling. I fled to my car, checking every shadow, every corner. I called Danny from home, his groggy voice a lifeline. He was fine, oblivious to the night's terror. I couldn't tell him, not yet. It felt too unreal in the daylight, like a fever breaking. But as I crawled into bed, exhaustion pulling me under, one truth anchored me. I'd never feel safe in that booth again. Somewhere out there, a man with a voice like frost was waiting, plotting the next move in a game I never chose to play. The next night, as I steeled myself for my shift, the phone loomed like a guillotine. I wondered if I'd chosen the wrong path, if another job might have spared me. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. He'd found me once. He could find me again. The game, it seemed, was only paused, its shadow stretching far beyond the airwaves. Greneke Kiwana Cerise. The moment I spotted the faint red gleam behind the parlor's antique clock, I knew my dream home had become a cage. What I didn't yet understand was that this discovery was merely the first thread in a tapestry of terror, one that would unravel my sense of safety and leave me hunted in my own life. I'd always yearned for a place to call mine, a sanctuary to anchor my roots. When I found the listing for the old brick townhouse on Sycamore Lane, it felt like fate. The price was suspiciously low for the city's heart, but the house was sturdy, its ivy-clad facade and leaded windows whispering charm despite needing a loving hand. The realtor, a brisk woman named Marjorie, pressed the deal with an eagerness that should have raised alarms. Blinded by visions of my future, I saw only opportunity. The day I moved in was a whirlwind, boxes teetering, furniture scraping, my mind alive with plans for paint and polish. By evening, as I sank into the creaking armchair, I felt the glow of ownership. That's when I noticed something off. Hanging a brass mirror in the hall, I caught a glint behind an old oil painting left by the prior owners. Curious, I eased the frame down and froze. A tiny red light blinked from the wall, steady as a heartbeat. My first thought was a quirky relic, maybe an old alarm system. But as I leaned closer, dread coiled in my gut. It was a camera, sleek and modern, its lens a cold, unblinking eye. My heart hammered as I began to search. In the parlor, another camera lurked in a bent slats. In the kitchen, one peered from behind the stove. In the bathroom, a lens glinted within the mirror's ornate frame. By the time I'd scoured every room, I'd found 11 more, each hidden with surgical precision. The realization hit like a blow. Someone had been watching me, capturing moments I thought private. My morning coffee, my late night reading, even my showers. I felt stripped bare, violated in a way words couldn't grasp. Who had done this? The previous owners? Marjorie? Or someone I hadn't even considered? My hands shook as I dialed the police. They arrived swiftly, their faces grim as I pointed out each device. They promised a specialist to extract the cameras and trace their origins, but their clipped tones offered little comfort. As they worked, I sat on the stoop, the house I'd loved hours ago, now a stranger's domain. Every memory of unpacking, of dreaming, felt tainted. Who had seen it all? What did they want? The police wrapped up near midnight, advising me to stay elsewhere while they processed the scene. Numb, I packed a bag and drove to a motel, its neon sign buzzing like my thoughts. Sleep eluded me, my mind churning with questions. Who was watching? Were they still out there, their eyes following me even now? At dawn, I met Detective Alvarez at the station. Her sharp eyes softened as she spoke, but her words were blunt. Ms. Harper, this is serious. These cameras are top tier, installed by someone who knew their craft. This wasn't a hobbyist. My stomach sank. Do you know who? I asked, dreading the answer. She shook her head. Not yet. We're digging into property records, checking everyone who's touched this house, owners, agents, contractors. But I need to ask, any enemies? Exes? Rivals? Anyone who'd target you? I shook my head, almost offended. Number, I'm nobody special. I don't know why anyone would care. Alvarez nodded, but her gaze lingered, as if weighing my words. We'll sweep again to ensure we got everything, but your house is a crime scene now. It'll be a while before you can return. I left the station adrift, the home I'd poured my savings into, now a forbidden zone. I drifted between motels and friends' couches, my life suspended in a fog of uncertainty. Strange things began to pile up. Calls from unknown numbers that cut off when I answered. A gray sedan parked too often on my street, a fleeting shadow in my townhouse's window that vanished when I blinked. I told myself it was paranoia, the strain twisting my senses, but the feeling of being hunted never faded. A month later, Alvarez called me back. Her voice carried a weary edge. We've hit a wall, Ms. Harper. The cameras were bought with cash, no trace. The installation's professional, but no records. The previous owners, an older couple now in Arizona, are as shocked as you. We'll keep the case open, but... She didn't finish, but I heard the truth. They might never find the culprit. I drove to my latest motel, the weight of never knowing crushing me. Then a spark ignited. If the police couldn't solve this, maybe I could. I'd lived in that house, walked its floors. Perhaps I'd missed something only I'd recognize. The next day, I stood before my townhouse, key trembling in my hand. It felt like trespassing, not returning home. I stepped inside, the air thick with memory and menace. Moving slowly, I searched for anything amiss. In the master bedroom, a faint scratch on the baseboard caught my eye. An arrow, etched so subtly it was nearly invisible. It pointed to the closet. My pulse raced as I opened the door, finding nothing but coats and boxes. Then in the back corner, a seam in the paneling gleamed. I pressed, and a hidden compartment clicked open, revealing a USB drive nestled within. I stared, torn between fear and curiosity. Should I hand it to Alvarez or look first? Need one out. I grabbed the drive and fled, the house's shadows pressing at my back. In my motel room, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen filled with video files, hundreds, spanning years. Not just of me, but of strangers, the old couple, families all living unaware in my house, their private moments stolen. The most recent folder bore my name, and its contents chilled me to the bone. Videos from the townhouse, yes, but also from my office, the cafe I frequented, the park where I jogged. Timestamps showed the surveillance hadn't stopped. This wasn't confined to Sycamore Lane. It was my entire life. Laid bare, I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. Answers hadn't brought relief, only deeper fear. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Loving the new place, Emma. Don't worry, I'm still watching. Always, the words were a knife, slicing through my fragile calm. I realized then that this horror wasn't over. It was growing, its roots entwined with my every step. The House of Hidden Eyes wasn't just a building, it was a web, and I was still caught. The moment I saw the flicker of movement in the shadowed window of that ramshackle house, I knew I'd driven into a trap. What I couldn't yet fathom was that this routine delivery would spiral into a desperate flight from a predator who saw me as more than just a driver. It was supposed to be my final drop of the night. For 6 months, I'd been shuttling meals for Quick Bite, scraping together cash to chip away at my college loans. Most shifts were a blur. Pick up, drop off, repeat, nothing to write home about. But this night carried a different weight from the start. The order pinged in just as I was ready to log off, from a dive called Greasy Spoon, a place I'd never heard of on the edge of Thornwood. The delivery address was even farther, a lone house down a winding, unpaved road that seemed to vanish into the pines. My instincts twitched, urging me to decline, but the tip was hefty, and one last run wouldn't kill me. If only I'd listened. The Greasy Spoon was a dump, its neon sign stuttering, windows so grimy they swallowed light. The cook barely glanced at me, shoving a greasy bag into my hands with a grunt that might have been good luck. As I drove to the address, the world grew sparse. Houses dwindled, streetlights vanished, and my GPS flickered, leaving me to navigate by memory. The road twisted through dense forest, branches scraping my car like fingers. Finally, a rusted mailbox loomed, the number matching my order. The driveway stretched long and rutted, leading to a house that looked like it hadn't seen care in decades. Peeling paint, sagging porch, shutters dangling like broken teeth. No lights glowed, no cars sat in the yard. I idled, weighing whether to leave the bag at the drive's end and bolt. But that tip called to me, so I steeled myself and pulled up. The gravel crunched under my tires, each sound too loud in the stillness. I grabbed the bag, my breath shallow, and stepped out. The air was thick, heavy with pine and something sour like decay. As I approached the porch, a shadow shifted in a darkened window. My heart lurched, but I pressed on, ringing the bell. Its hollow chime echoed inside. Silence followed, then a slow creak as the door inched open. A man stood there, tall and gaunt, his eyes sunk in pools that seemed to drink me in. His smile was thin, a crack in a stone face. "My order's here," he said, his voice oddly formal, like a line rehearsed. "Come inside, I'll grab your payment." Every nerve screamed to run, but I stepped over the threshold, clutching the bag like a shield. The house was a ruin, wallpaper curling like dead skin, the air thick with mold. The man vanished into a side room, muttering softly, leaving me in the dim entryway. That's when I saw them. Photographs pinned to the wall, dozens of women captured in candid moments, walking, laughing, unaware. Many wore delivery vests, their logos matching mine. A chill clawed my spine. These weren't family photos. They were trophies. I had to get out. I turned for the door, but the man was there, blocking my path. His smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Leaving already? He asked, his voice a low growl. We haven't shared the meal yet. I tried to shove past, but his hand clamped my arm, iron strong. I can't let you go, he said, almost regretful. I've been waiting for someone like you. Panic surged. I thrashed, screaming, my elbow catching something glass that shattered on the floor. His grip faltered, and I wrenched free, sprinting for the door. His footsteps pounded behind, heavy on the warped boards. I burst outside, fumbling for my keys, and dove into my car just as his hand grazed my shoulder. In a blind frenzy, I swung my keys like a blade, catching his cheek. He stumbled, and I slammed the door, locking it. My hands shook so badly I could barely start the engine. The man lunged, hammering my window as the car roared to life. I threw it into reverse, tires spitting gravel, and tore down the driveway, the house shrinking in my rear view. I thought I'd escaped. I was wrong. Headlights flared behind me, a battered truck roaring onto the road. He was coming for me. The next hour was a nightmare of speed and fear. I weaved through Thornwood's back roads, taking random turns, my heart in my throat as the truck stayed close, sometimes pulling alongside, its driver a shadowed blur trying to force me off the asphalt. My phone was useless, no signal in this nowhere. My gas gauge dipped, the needle a taunt. I couldn't outrun him forever. Then, like a beacon, I saw lights. A 24-hour gas station, its fluorescent glow cutting the dark. I screeched into the lot, horn blaring, and stumbled out, gasping. An older man, the attendant, looked up, startled as I burst inside. Please, I panted. Call the police, someone's after me. He didn't hesitate, grabbing the phone and dialing 911. Through the window, I saw the truck slow, then speed past, its taillights swallowed by the night. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I spilled my story, the house, the photos, the chase. They listened, jotting notes, but their questions were sharp. Could I describe the man clearly? The truck's make? Why hadn't I taken a photo? They promised to investigate, but urged me to find a safe place for the night. I crashed at a motel across town, too wired to sleep. Every passing car a threat. The next day, a detective called. They'd found the house empty. No photos, no man, just dust and rot. They'd keep looking, but evidence was thin. I quit Quick Bite that day. The money wasn't worth my life. Weeks passed without incident, but the fear lingered. I'd glimpse a truck like his, or a tall figure that vanished when I turned. Paranoia. Maybe he was still out there waiting. I moved, changed my number, locked my past away. But at night, when the world quiets, I see his eyes in my rear view, feel his hand on my shoulder. He's a shadow I can't outrun. I've rebuilt piece by piece, a new job, new routines. I've learned to fight, carrying mace and a whistle, and my door's triple locked. Some call it obsession, I call it survival. The worst is the uncertainty, knowing he's out there, hunting his next mark. Every delivery, every unfamiliar car sets my pulse racing, but I won't let him win. I live. I move forward, refusing to let fear cage me. That night changed me, sharpened my edges, but it also showed my strength. To the man who saw me as prey, you failed. I'm here standing, and I'll keep driving my own road, even if I check the mirrors a little too often. The moment I saw the name Elliot Kane scrawled on his badge, pinned to his crisp shirt, my stomach twisted into knots. Elliot, the unassuming kid from biology class, now stood before me with a gaze that burned with a fervor I'd never known. This wasn't the nostalgic reunion I'd expected. It was the opening act of a nightmare that would reshape my world. 10 years had passed since I'd roamed the halls of Crestwood High, a decade of carving out a career, forging new bonds, and bearing the awkwardness of my teenage self. When the invitation for our 10-year reunion landed in my inbox, I wavered. Curiosity, laced with a touch of pride, won out. I wanted to see who'd become what, to weigh my own path against theirs. It was vanity, pure and simple. If I'd known the darkness waiting, I'd have deleted that email and never looked back. The reunion was held in the school's gymnasium, dressed up with twinkling lights, crepe streamers, and a disco ball that spun sad, fractured glints across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of cheap wine and forced nostalgia. I arrived late, hoping for a subtle entrance, but slipped in unnoticed, the hum of 100 conversations swallowing me. Faces flickered in the crowd. The soccer star, now softer around the edges. The prom queen, her laugh too bright, too brittle. Everyone was performing, flaunting their polished lives. It was exhausting. And I was halfway to the bar for a drink when a hand grazed my shoulder. I turned to find Elliot Kane. In high school, he'd been a ghost. Quiet, average, always lingering at the edges of the room. We'd paired up for a few lab assignments, dissecting frogs and mixing compounds, but never shared more than polite small talk. Now he stood tall, his smile wide but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. "Claire," he said, his voice warm with an intensity that felt misplaced. "I was praying you'd come." Something in his tone prickled my skin, but I brushed it off. "Elliot, hey," I replied, scrambling for words. "It's been forever. How are you holding up?" His smile deepened, but his eyes stayed cold. "Oh, I'm thriving. I've thought of you often, you know." The words landed heavy, too personal for a near stranger. I forced a laugh, already scanning for an exit. "That's sweet," I said. "Listen, I was just grabbing a drink. Good to see you." I turned, but his hand shot out, fingers curling around my arm with startling strength. "Let me get it for you," he insisted, his voice smooth but unyielding. "What's your poison?" Before I could protest, he was steering me to the bar, his grip firm. Curious glances followed us. Elliot Kane and Claire Novak, an odd pair after all these years. At the bar, Elliot filled the silence with chatter, his knowledge of my life unnerving. He knew my job at the gallery, my apartment in the arts district, even my cat's name, Miso, details I'd shared sparingly, if at all. "How do you know all this?" I asked, my voice sharp. His smile didn't falter. "I keep tabs on old friends," he said, his tone light but laced with something darker, "especially ones like you." The bartender slid us our drinks, and I took a long sip, needing the burn to steady me. Elliot watched, his gaze a weight I couldn't shake, like a moth pinned to a board. As the night wore on, I tried to mingle, but Elliot was a shadow, always near. He hovered at the edge of every chat, appeared outside the restroom when I emerged, joined me the moment I stepped out for air. Under the stars, he leaned close. "Remember that biology project? The one on enzymes?" I nodded, uneasy. "I learned so much," he continued, his voice soft, almost reverent. "Not just about reactions, but about you. The way you tucked your hair behind your ear when you focused. The scent of your lavender perfume. The cadence of your laugh." My blood ran cold. This wasn't reminiscing, it was obsession. "Elliot," I said, stepping back, "that was ages ago. We were kids." His face tightened, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Not to me," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "It feels like yesterday. Every day is yesterday when I think of you, Claire." I backed away, but he matched my step, closing the gap. "I've waited for this night," he whispered, "to see you again, to tell you how I feel." My pulse raced. "I need to go," I said, my voice shaking. I turned for the gym, but his hand clamped my wrist, yanking me back. "You can't," he hissed. "Not yet. We have so much to talk about." I tore free and ran, bursting into the gym, my breath ragged. The crowd was a blur, too caught in their own worlds to notice my panic. I scanned for a friend, anyone, but found only strangers. Elliot's presence loomed behind me. I spun to face him, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "Why are you running?" he demanded. After all I've done for you? Done for me? I stammered, bewildered. Elliot, we weren't even friends. He laughed, a jagged sound that drew stares. Oh, Claire, we've been closer than you know. Every day you just didn't see me. The pieces clicked, chilling and clear. The anonymous texts I'd received for years, the gifts left at my door with no name, the constant sense of being watched. It was him. It was you, I whispered. All this time. His face lit up, as if I'd handed him a prize. You get it now, he said, reaching for me. We're meant to be, Claire. I knew it in that lab, and tonight we start. I stumbled back, bumping into guests, ignoring their startled looks. Stay away, I shouted, my voice cutting through the din. You're unhinged. His eyes flashed with rage. Unhinged? He spat. I'm not unhinged. I love you. I've loved you for 10 years while you ignored me, dated others, lived without me. But that ends now. He lunged, but I was faster, weaving through the crowd, their shouts fading behind my pounding heart. I burst into the parking lot, fumbling for my keys. Elliot's voice echoed, calling my name, his steps closing in. I reached my car, diving inside and locking the doors as his fist slammed against the window. Claire! He roared, pounding the glass. We belong together. I started the engine, tires screeching as I peeled out, his silhouette shrinking in my rear view, his gaze a brand even from afar. I drove for hours, too terrified to go home. At a diner's payphone, I called the police, my hands trembling as I recounted the night. They took my statement, but I heard the doubt in their voices. A reunion prank gone too far, perhaps. But I knew Elliot's obsession was real, a fire that wouldn't gutter. I holed up in a motel under a false name, jumping at every noise, convinced he'd track me. Days became weeks. I changed my number, erased my online life, considered fleeing the city. The fear was a constant companion, spiking with every unknown call, every familiar face in a crowd. The police found evidence, cameras in my old apartment, a journal of my routines, proof of years of stalking. Elliot was arrested, his trial a storm of headlines. Testifying meant reliving that night, his empty stare in the courtroom, a reminder of how close I'd come to being his. He's locked away now, life without parole, but safety feels like a lie. How many others are out there, hiding behind warm smiles and old memories? I've rebuilt a new home, new locks, a therapist to untangle the knots of fear. But I flinch at shadows, wake to phantom footsteps. I share this to warn you. The past can hunt you, and obsession wears a familiar face. If you feel eyes on you, if the air turns heavy with unseen intent, don't dismiss it. The difference between a fond memory and a waking nightmare might be one misplaced trust. The moment I saw those headlights flare too close in my rear view, I knew the night had turned against me. What I didn't yet grasp was that this lonely drive would become a heart-pounding gauntlet, pursued by unseen hunters who thrived on the dark. I was on my way to my cousin's wedding in Briarfield, a small town 3 hours from my city apartment. It was a last-minute trip, my shift at the bookstore ending late, so I hit the road well after midnight. Hollow roads stretched before me, a narrow vein of asphalt cutting through endless fields and skeletal trees. The radio crackled, unable to hold a signal, leaving only the hum of my tires and the occasional whip of wind against my old hatchback. I was tired, my eyes heavy, but the thought of the wedding, laughter, family, a rare chance to celebrate, kept me pushing through the dark. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a pair of headlights flickering in the distance behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another late-night traveler. But they grew closer, too fast, their glare harsh in my mirror. I squinted, trying to make out the vehicle, but the lights were blinding, high and unyielding. My gut tightened. I'd heard stories of road games, pranks played on solitary drivers, but this felt different, deliberate, predatory. I pressed the gas, nudging my speed up, hoping to put distance between us. The lights stayed glued to my tail. Then a second set of headlights appeared, splitting the night from a side road. My breath caught. Two vehicles now, one behind, one angling to join the first. I scanned the horizon, searching for a gas station, a town, anything but the road was a void. No signs of life. The vehicle behind, a hulking pickup I could tell now, flashed its high beams. Once, twice, three times. A long, guttural blast of its horn followed. Not a warning, but a signal. Raw and menacing. The second vehicle, a boxy SUV, surged forward, pulling alongside me. I risked a glance, but its windows were black, tinted to hide whoever sat inside. My heart pounded. This wasn't coincidence. It was a hunt. The SUV swerved, its side inches from mine. I yanked the wheel, tires screeching, barely avoiding a collision. My car shuddered, the engine whining as I floored it, pushing past 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, a reckless speed on these pitted roads, but fear drowned caution. The pickup and SUV matched me, boxing me in, one on each side. At this pace, a single misstep would send us all into the ditch. Up ahead, a dirt track branched off, unmarked, swallowed by the dark. In a split-second gamble, I slammed the brakes and wrenched the wheel, skidding onto the turn. The pickup's horn blared, tires squealing as they tried to follow, but their heavier frames couldn't match my car's sharp pivot. I bought a moment, nothing more. The new road was a rutted nightmare, my car jolting over rocks, branches clawing at the windows. I didn't slow, couldn't, the roar of engines still echoing behind. I took every fork blindly, zigzagging through the maze, my only goal to lose them. After what felt like hours but was likely 20 minutes, the pursuit faded. No more lights, no more noise. I eased off the gas, my car limping, the engine coughing from the strain. The silence was oppressive, the trees pressing in like sentinels. Then through the branches, a faint glow flickered. Hope surged. A town, a house, anything. I followed it, the road widening as I rounded a bend. There it was, a lone gas station, its neon sign a beacon in the void. I pulled up, hands trembling so badly I could barely kill the engine. As I stumbled out, the station door swung open, an elderly man peering at me, his face creased with concern. "You okay, miss?" he called, already moving toward me. The kindness in his voice broke me. Tears spilled as I choked out the story. The headlights, the chase, the terror. He listened, his expression darkening, and led me inside, locking the door. "You're not the first," he said, handing me a mug of bitter coffee. Folks have been run off this road before. Cars vanish, drivers too. Sheriff says there's no proof, but he shook his head, leaving the rest unsaid. He let me use the phone to call the police and my cousin, warning her I'd be late. As I waited, every creak of the station made me flinch, certain those vehicles would roll up, their lights cutting through the glass. The deputies arrived, taking my statement with practiced calm. I described the pickup, the SUV, the chase, but my details were thin. No plates, no faces, just shapes in the dark. They promised to patrol, but their eyes betrayed doubt. Was I exaggerating? Drunk? I saw the questions in their glances. The old man offered to let me stay till dawn. I accepted, too shaken to drive. As the sun rose, painting the fields in soft gold, I felt a fragile safety return. I thanked the man and drove on, reaching the wedding shaken but whole. I told my family a softened version, sparing them the fear. But I never took Hollow Road again. I stick to bright highways now, always checking my mirrors because I know the truth. Some monsters don't lurk in shadows. They drive behind you, their headlights a promise of pursuit. If you're ever on a quiet road and see lights too close, too persistent, don't ignore the prickle in your gut. It might be the only thing keeping you from their hunt. The moment I saw those unmarked crates rolling into the belly of that shadowy plane, I knew I'd stumbled into a secret I wasn't meant to survive. What I couldn't yet comprehend was that my dull night shift at the airport would become a desperate fight to expose a truth that reached far beyond the tarmac. I'd been a night guard at Stonefield Regional Airport for 7 months, a job so monotonous it felt like sleepwalking. The pay kept my bills at bay, and I liked the quiet, empty terminals, the hum of distant engines, the occasional red-eye crew passing through. Most nights, it was just me, my flashlight, and the flicker of security monitors. That night began like any other. I punched in at 10 p.m., nodded to the evening guard as he shuffled out and started my rounds. The cargo bays were locked, the lounges silent, everything as it should be. It wasn't until my 2 a.m. patrol that the air shifted. A low rumble cut through the stillness, the unmistakable growl of a plane taxiing in. No flights were scheduled, and unscheduled landing usually brought a flurry of chatter. This one was stealthy, a ghost slipping onto the runway. Curiosity tugged me to a window overlooking the tarmac. I stayed in the shadows, peering out. The plane was a plain cargo hauler, no logos or markings, its hull a dull gray under the floodlights. A group of men spilled from a hangar I'd thought empty, dressed in dark coveralls, moving with the precision of soldiers. The plane's cargo hold yawned open, and they began unloading crates, large, wooden, unmarked. My pulse quickened. Cargo at Stonefield was always labeled, logged, tracked. These crates were phantoms, meant to vanish. I should have turned back, finished my rounds, and pretended I'd seen nothing. But something rooted me there, watching as the crates were whisked into the hangar. Then I saw it. One man fumbled, a crate crashing to the ground, its lid splitting. In the dim light, something gleamed inside. A metallic curve, unmistakably the barrel of a rifle. My breath caught. Weapons, smuggled through my airport. This was no small crime. It was a conspiracy, vast and deadly. I needed to report it, to call someone, but as I reached for my radio, my elbow clipped a stack of boxes. The crash echoed like a gunshot. On the tarmac, every head snapped toward my window. I ducked, heart hammering, praying I was invisible. Silence stretched. Then voices, sharp, urgent, and the clatter of boots entering the terminal. Panic surged. I ran, my footsteps too loud, sprinting through the cargo bay toward the main concourse. Where could I go? Who could I trust? Security might be compromised. How else could this happen under their noses? I needed a phone, a plan. Ducking into a maintenance closet, I pressed against the wall, catching my breath. Outside, voices hissed, "She can't be far. Find her and keep it quiet. No attention." My blood ran cold. They knew I was here, and they'd kill to silence me. I couldn't stay. Cracking the door, I peered into the empty concourse and slipped out, crouching behind check-in counters, moving toward the office where a landline waited. Halfway there, a shout, "There!" I bolted, full sprint, my lungs burning as boots thundered behind. I reached the office, slamming the door and fumbling the lock, my hands slick with sweat. Grabbing the phone, I dialed 911, words tumbling out. Stonefield Airport, men with guns. Smuggling. They're after me. The door shuddered under a heavy blow, wood splintering. The line was cut as the door burst open. A man with a scarred face loomed, a pistol leveled at my chest. "Stupid move," he growled, his voice cold as steel. Two others grabbed my arms, their grips bruising, and marched me to the hangar. Inside, crates towered, enough firepower for a war. A man in a tailored suit approached, his calm demeanor chilling. He studied me, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "What do we do with her, boss?" one of my captors asked. The suit sighed. This complicates things. We can't have loose ends, but a missing guard raises questions. He turned to me. Name? Nora, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Well, Nora, you've seen too much. Could I persuade you to forget this? I stayed silent, fear choking me. He nodded as if expecting it. Pity, we'll have to... Sirens wailed in the distance. The hangar froze. Impossible, the scarred man snarled. We cut her call. The suit's eyes narrowed. She's cleverer than we thought. He barked orders. Pack it up. Leave nothing. The men scrambled, crates vanishing back into the plane with eerie speed. The suit turned to me. Your lucky night, Nora. We're out of time to deal with you properly. He nodded to my captors. Lock her in the office. Make sure she can't talk. They dragged me back, binding my wrist with duct tape and shoving me into a supply closet. Something heavy scraped against the door, trapping me. Through the walls, I heard shouts, engines roaring as the plane took off. Then closer, boots and radio static. Hello, I screamed, throat raw. In here. After an eternity, the door opened, a deputy's flashlight blinding me. The next hours were a blur. Statements, questions, my story spilling out in fragments. The police found traces in the hangar, scuff marks, fuel logs for an unscheduled flight. But the crates, the men, were gone, melted into the night. By dawn, I sat in a break room, a blanket around my shoulders, coffee cooling in my hands. A detective faced me, his voice heavy. We've got evidence of something, but it's thin. This goes deep, Nora. We're getting pressure from above to bury it. Whoever they were, they've got reach. A chill settled in my bones. Am I safe? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Maybe not. We can offer protection, maybe a new identity. But your old life, it's gone. I left Stonefield that morning, the sunlight harsh against my exhaustion. I quit the job, moved from place to place, always glancing over my shoulder. The truth I'd glimpsed was a wound, the dark machinery of power, moving unseen, unstopped. Those men are still out there, their crates still flowing, their plans unbroken, and they know my name. I live now in shadows, a ghost myself, because I saw too much and lived to tell. If you're ever in a quiet place and see something that doesn't fit, think twice before you act. Once you cross that line, the darkness doesn't let you go. The night shift never ends. It just grows blacker. When the acrid scent of blood hit me, sharp against the pine air, I knew my weekend escape had twisted into something vile. I hadn't yet realized I'd become the hunted, racing through a shadowed hollow where the trees themselves seemed to whisper of pursuit. I'd been planning this solo trek for months, a chance to shed the weight of a brutal year at the ad agency. Deadlines had burned me hollow, and I craved the silence of the Blackthorn Hollow, a rugged stretch of wilderness far from the city's clamor. I'd hiked before, but always in groups, campfires crackling with laughter. This time I wanted solitude, the kind that mends a frayed spirit. The thought was exhilarating, though a faint unease gnawed at me. I picked a secluded glade, a day's march from the nearest ranger outpost, where autumn had dusted the forest with crimson and amber. The air was crisp, laced with earth and resin. The hike-in was tough but invigorating, my legs humming by the time I reached the clearing, a quiet nook beside a chattering brook. I set up my tent, sparked a modest fire, and watched dusk paint the sky, the world's noise fading to a whisper. That first night, I slept like the dead, the forest's pulse a gentle lullaby. The next day, I wandered, snapping shots of twisted roots and fleeting foxes, soaking in the stillness. It was the reset I needed, a severance from the grind. As evening loomed, I trekked back to camp, eager for another night under the stars. That's when the air turned wrong. A chemical tang, like spilled bleach, cut through the woodsy scent, jarring and out of place. The forest hushed, its usual chorus of critters snuffed out. My skin prickled, my steps slowing as I neared my site. My tent stood untouched, my gear in place. But then I saw them, boot prints, deep and foreign, circling my fire pit. They weren't mine. My heart kicked into gear. Someone had been here, but who? And why? I scanned the underbrush, weighing whether to pack up and bolt. Then voices drifted from the trees, low, clipped, drawing closer. Instinct took over. I ducked behind a mossy boulder, peering through the ferns. Two men stepped into the glade, dressed in dark gear, heavy boots crunching the earth. They carried duffels that clinked with metal as they dropped them. "Good spot," one grunted. "Off the paths, but we can move fast." The other nodded, eyes sweeping the clearing. "Set it up. We're cooking by nightfall." They unzipped their bags and dread sank into me like cold steel. Out came jugs of liquid, rubber hoses, a burner, the makings of a drug lab, raw and illegal. I'd walked into a meth operation hidden in the heart of Blackthorn. My mind raced. I needed to reach the Rangers, to sound the alarm, but I was trapped. Any sound a death sentence. These weren't amateurs, they'd kill to keep this quiet. So I stayed, muscles locked, breath shallow, as they rigged their setup, the chemical stink burning my throat. Hours crept by, the sun sinking, the glade pooling with shadows. My body screamed from holding still, but fear was a stronger chain. As darkness fell, 3 more men arrived, their faces carved with hard lines, their movements practiced. They murmured about shipments, routes, payoffs, pieces of a vast network. I was eavesdropping on a criminal empire, and I was its only witness. Then, easing a cramp, my foot nudged the stick. It snapped loud as a shot. The glade froze. "What's that?" one man hissed, his hand dropping to a holster. "Just a critter," another muttered, but his voice was taut. "Check it," the first barked. "No chances." 2 men advanced, flashlights slashing the dark. I was seconds from being found, heart pounding. I erupted from my cover, sprinting into the trees. Shouts exploded, boots pounding behind. I ran blindly, branches whipping my face, roots snagging my boots. A gunshot cracked, the bullet buzzing past to splinter a trunk. Terror fueled me, pushing me beyond pain. But they were closing in, their knowledge of the hollow outpacing my panic. Ahead, the ground dipped, the rush of water rising. The brook must feed a torrent nearby. A desperate idea sparked. I veered toward the sound, lungs searing, legs burning. Another shot grazed the air, too close. The trees parted, revealing a cliff's edge. The river below roaring, white and wild, 30 feet down. No time for doubt. As a bullet sparked off stone, I jumped. The drop stretched forever, then the water hit, a freezing fist driving the air from my chest. The current seized me, tumbling me through its churn. I clawed to the surface, gasping, then let it carry me, fighting to keep my head up. Time dissolved. Minutes, maybe hours. The river calmed, spitting me onto a pebbled bank. I lay there, shivering, coughing, too drained to move. When strength crept back, I stood. Lost in the wild, my pack gone, my bearings shattered. But I was alive beyond their reach. I picked a direction, tracing the river's curve, knowing it would lead somewhere. 2 days of foraging routes and sipping from the flow brought me to a trail. Another day, and I stumbled into a ranger outpost, my clothes ragged, my story pouring out in a frantic rush. The rangers listened, wide-eyed, and called in state troopers and feds. A search team scoured the hollow, but the lab was gone, leaving only traces, discarded bottles, churned earth. My account fed a larger probe, cracking open a drug ring stretching across the region. Arrest followed, but the men I'd seen, the operation's heart, slipped away like mist. Years later, the dreams still come. I'm fleeing through an endless wood, the crunch of pursuit at my heels. I hike now, but never alone, always with a group's safety. The wilderness, once my solace, carries a jagged edge. Every snap of a twig, every flicker in the trees sets my pulse racing. I know those men won't find me again, but fear doesn't heed reason. In my sleep, I smell that chemical burn, feel eyes in the dark. Survival is supposed to forge strength, but I'm not convinced. What I hold is this: I endured, and each day since is a hard-earned breath. The hollow taught me a cruel lesson. Beauty masks danger, and the wild harbors hunters who stalk with human cunning. If you're ever deep in the forest and find a camp abandoned, or feel a gaze from the shadows, don't shrug off the chill in your bones. It might be the only thing keeping you from their trap. As the crowd's roar swallowed me and I felt a stranger's hand on my arm, I sensed the night's joy curdling into dread. I hadn't yet grasped that this vibrant festival would become a frantic escape from a darkness that wore a friendly face. I'd been counting down to the Moonlit Pulse Festival for months, a 3-day explosion of music, dance, and freedom in the heart of Ravenwood Valley. It was my chance to shed the grind of my desk job, to lose myself in rhythm and light. I'd scrimped for the ticket, roped in my friends Tara and Leo, and packed my car with glitter and hope. This was to be our summer's crown. The first day delivered everything I'd dreamed. Bass lines that thrummed in my bones, crowds swaying as one, laughter spilling like starlight. Tara, Leo, and I danced until our souls ached, grinned until our faces hurt, marveling at the sea of souls united in ecstasy. It was magic, pure and wild. The trouble began during the second night's headline set, a DJ whose beats felt like a heartbeat. The crowd was a living thing, bodies pressed tight, moving in sync. In the chaos, I lost Tara and Leo, swept apart by the tide. I wasn't panicked at first. We'd set a meeting point by the main stage's light tower for moments like this. I'd find them there once the set ended, but as I pushed through the throng, the air grew heavy, the lights too sharp, the music a disorienting pulse. A hand grazed my shoulder, and I turned to see a guy my age, lean with dark curls and a smile that seemed kind. "You okay?" he shouted over the din. "You look lost." I nodded, grateful for the concern. "Got split from my friends," I yelled back. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I can help you find them. I'm Sam." I hesitated, my parents' warnings about strangers echoing faintly. But this was a festival. Everyone was a stranger, and Sam's eyes were soft, his offer genuine. Besides, we were surrounded by thousands. What could go wrong? "I'm Maya," I said. "Thanks, that'd be great." Sam took my hand, saying it was to keep us linked in the crush, and led me through the pulsing mass. I noticed we were moving away from the stage, toward the festival's fringes, where the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned. "Where are we going?" I asked, shouting to be heard. "It's too packed here," Sam called back. "We'll spot your friends better from the ridge up there." It made sense, so I followed, the music fading to a distant throb. The darkness deepened, the festival's glow barely reaching us. A thread of unease wove through me. "Maybe we should head back," I said, tugging my hand. "My friends are probably at the tower by now." Sam's grip tightened, just enough to notice. "Just a bit further," he said, his voice firmer. That's when I saw them. Two men lurking near a cluster of pines, their silhouettes sharp against the night. They straightened as we approached, one flashing a grin that was all teeth, no warmth. Fear spiked through me, electric and raw. I yanked my hand, but Sam's fingers were of ice. "Let go," I snapped, panic rising. He turned and the kindness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory glint. "Don't make a fuss, Maya," he said, his tone low, venomous. You wouldn't want to spoil the party. I opened my mouth to scream, but one of the other men was behind me, his hand clamping over my lips. I thrashed, kicking, but their strength overwhelmed me. She's a fighter, the third man chuckled, his voice a sick promise. This'll be good. Terror consumed me. This couldn't be real. Not here, not now. They dragged me toward a van parked just beyond the trees, its side door yawning like a maw. My mind screamed, if they got me inside, it was over. In a surge of desperation, I went limp, my weight dropping suddenly. The man holding me stumbled, his grip loosening for a heartbeat. I tore free and ran, faster than I'd ever moved, my chest burning, heart a drum against my ribs. Their shouts chased me, footsteps pounding the earth. I screamed, help! Someone! Hoping the festival's noise wouldn't drown me out, I glanced back. Sam was gaining, his face twisted with rage. I pushed harder, lungs aflame, legs trembling. The tree line broke, and I burst back into the festival's edge, lights and music crashing over me like a wave. Help! I screamed again, sprinting toward a knot of dancers. A security guard turned, his eyes catching my terror. He moved toward me, hand on his radio as I reached him, gasping, tears streaming. They tried to... I couldn't finish, collapsing against his arm. He spoke rapidly into his radio, his voice a lifeline. I turned to see Sam and his accomplices halt at the crowd's edge. Sam's eyes locked on mine, a promise of unfinished business. Then they melted into the dark. What followed was a haze. Police interviews, a hospital checkup, tearful hugs with Tara and Leo. I described Sam and the others as best I could, but I knew the odds of catching them were slim. They'd planned this, likely struck before. The thought churned my stomach. Tara and Leo wanted to leave, but I stayed, needing to reclaim the festival, to not let them steal it entirely. I clung to my friends, jumping at every shadow, scanning every face for Sam's. His phantom grip haunted me, but slowly the music's pulse stirred something else. Defiance, strength. On the final night, as the last act played, I stood with Tara and Leo, our arms linked, the crowd's energy a balm. Tears fell, not from fear, but from gratitude, resolve. I'd faced the abyss and clawed my way out. The road ahead would be rough, nightmares, therapy, days when fear would claw back. But in that moment, surrounded by thousands, I vowed not to let Sam define me. As the music soared, I cheered, for the songs, for my survival, for the future I'd fight for. The moonlit pulse wasn't the carefree escape I'd planned. It was a crucible, forging a fiercer me, one wary but unbroken, cherishing every note of joy as a victory over those who tried to take it. I share this to urge you. If you see someone lost in a crowd, reach out. Be the hand that pulls them back. The line between celebration and horror can be a single act of kindness or its absence. And if you feel the night turn wrong, trust that instinct. It might just carry you through the dark. Tornillar. When I first strummed that vintage guitar, its chords resonating like a siren's call, I felt a rush of triumph. I had no inkling that this purchase would entangle me in a web of dread, spun by a stranger whose obsession would haunt my every step. For months, I'd scoured online listings in dusty pawn shops, chasing the perfect addition to my guitar collection. When I stumbled upon a 1965 Gibson Firebird, its sunburst finish glowing in the photos, my heart skipped. The price was steep but fair for such a gem, and the seller, a man named Victor, had glowing reviews and a deep knowledge of vintage gear. We exchanged messages diving into the guitar's provenance and wear. Victor was charming, quick with replies, even offering to meet so I could play it first. It seemed like a dream deal, my excitement blinding me to the faint chill in his words. We agreed to meet at a bustling coffee shop in Oak Ridge, a neutral spot that felt safe. I arrived early, sipping a too-sweet mocha, my anticipation buzzing. Victor walked in, guitar case in hand, and relief washed over me. He was unremarkable, mid-40s, wiry, with a disarming grin that eased my nerves. The Firebird was a marvel, its frets worn from years of passion, its tone rich and alive. When I played a chord, it sang, a voice from another era. I was smitten. We sealed the deal there, cash changing hands. As Victor passed me the case, his fingers lingered on mine, a touch too long. I brushed it off, too focused on my prize to heed the warning. Enjoy her, he said, his voice oddly weighted. I'll be around. I missed the edge in his tone, already dreaming of the songs I'd coaxed from those strings. The next week was a blur of joy. I played the Firebird every spare moment, its sound weaving into my bones. I even started sketching a new song, inspired by its resonance. But by the seventh day, unease crept in. Walking home from the record store, I felt eyes on me, a prickle at my neck. I glanced back, but the street was empty, just lamplight and shadows. That night, I swore I saw a figure across from my loft, staring up at my window, but when I blinked, they were gone. I told myself it was the city's pulse, playing tricks. Then the text began, unknown numbers, cryptic and precise. Loving the Firebird's sound tonight. My skin crawled. How did they know I was playing? I replied, demanding a name. Silence answered. The incidents mounted. More texts, each noting things I'd done. Buying coffee, meeting friends, walking my dog. A black sedan lingered on my block, day after day. Once, I caught a shadow duck behind a lamppost as I left my building. The Firebird, once my joy, felt tainted, as if it carried a curse. I stopped playing, locking it in its case, but the sense of being watched grew. A weight that followed me everywhere. Photos started appearing in my mailbox. Snapshots of me at work. At the park laughing with my sister, all taken from a distance. My unawareness of violation. Fear became my shadow, eroding my sleep, my peace. I went to the police, but without a clear threat. They could only file a report, urging me to log every incident. I felt exposed, alone. The breaking point came one night when a soft scrape sounded outside my bedroom window. I froze, heart pounding, as the lock rattled, someone testing it. Panic surged. I grabbed my phone, 911 ready, and scanned for a weapon. The Firebird's case leaned against the wall. I hefted the guitar like a club, its weight solid in my trembling hands. The front door creaked open, a shadow stepping inside. Told you I'd be around. Victor's voice slithered from the dark, smooth and menacing. I didn't think. I swung, the guitar crashing against his skull with a sickening crunch. He crumpled, motionless. I stood, shaking, the ruined instrument dangling from my hands, its strings snapping like broken promises. I called 911, my voice a frayed thread. The police arrived, sirens shattering the night. What followed was a storm, interviews, evidence, therapy sessions. Victor's obsession unraveled. He'd stalked others who'd bought his instruments. My loft littered with his traces, photos, logs of my days, hidden mics. He went to prison, his gaze in court a cold reminder of my narrow escape. The Firebird was held as evidence, returned months later, but I couldn't touch it. I donated it to a music program, hoping it could sing for someone else, free of its past. Years on, the scars remain. I check my locks thrice nightly, flinch at every stranger's glance. I vet every online seller with a detective's zeal. Trust no deal too good. The Firebird changed me, honed my caution, but also revealed my fight. I play again, though it took time. Each note a defiance, a claim on my life. If you're buying online, meeting a stranger for a deal, heed your instincts. A smile can hide a hunter, and a bargain can cost more than money. Victor took my peace, but not my spirit. I'm still here, strumming my own song, even if I always watch the shadows. As I caught the faint blink of a hidden lens in the cabin's rafters, my heart sank, realizing my retreat had become a stage for unseen eyes. I couldn't yet fathom that this was the opening move in a chilling game, one that would test my will to survive. I'd been dreaming of this getaway for months, a balm for a year that had ground me down with endless deadlines at the law firm. When I found the listing for a remote cabin in the Blue Ridge foothills, it was like a gift. Cozy log walls, a porch overlooking mist-clad peaks, and best of all, no Wi-Fi or cell signal, a true escape from the world's clamor. The drive up was a revelation, winding through forests where autumn sparked in fiery hues. Pulling up to the cabin, I felt the knots in my shoulders loosen. It was perfect, rustic yet warm, with a stocked pantry and a stone hearth begging for a fire. I spent the first day hiking trails that wove through pine and shale, the silence a tonic, broken only by the rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. That night, I cooked a simple stew and curled up by the fire with a novel, more at peace than I'd been in years. The second night brought the first crack in that calm. As I prepared for bed, a tiny light flickered in the bedroom's corner, high in the rafters. I thought it might be a stray LED, perhaps part of the smoke alarm, but closer inspection froze my blood. It was a camera, small and sleek, its red eye pulsing. My mind raced. How long had it been there? Who had planted it? Was someone watching me now? Panic drove me to search the cabin. I found two more. One in the living room, tucked into a knot in the cedar beams, and another in the bathroom, peering from a vent's grill. The realization was a gut punch. My every move, from cooking to bathing, had been captured. I wanted to flee, to drive back to the city, but the mountain road was a treacherous coil in the dark. I was stuck until dawn. Sleep was a lost cause. I sat in the living room, clutching a butcher knife, jumping at every groan of the old wood. As morning light crept through the windows, resolve replaced fear. I wouldn't be a victim. I'd find the puppet master and make them answer. I started by disabling the cameras, taping over their lenses with duct tape from the kitchen. Then I scoured the cabin for clues. In a desk drawer, amid bills and repair receipts, I found a leather-bound journal. Its pages were a horror show. Handwritten notes detailing past guests' habits, their meals, their private talks. This wasn't idle spying, it was a twisted obsession, a catalog of stolen lives. Before I could process it, a gravel crunch outside stopped my heart, a vehicle pulling up. The watcher was here. My instincts screamed, confront, hide, or run. Fear chose for me. I grabbed the journal and bolted upstairs, slipping into a linen closet as the front door creaked open. Footsteps echoed, slow and measured, moving through the rooms. I heard them pause, likely spotting the taped cameras. Come out, little mouse, a man's voice called, playful yet venomous. I saw you find my toys. I pressed deeper into the closet, knife gripped tight, my palms slick. The steps climbed the stairs, deliberate, unhurried. Through a crack in the door, I glimpsed him. Tall, lean, his face sharp with a hunter's calm. Clever girl, he said, his voice filling the bedroom. But this is my board, and I know every square. He reached for the closet door, and my breath caught, my body braced to fight. Then, a miracle. A phone rang, not mine, left useless in my car. It was his. He paused, pulling a cell from his pocket. What? He snapped. A pause, then a scowl. Not now. I'm fine, an hour. He cursed, glancing around. Don't wander off, he taunted, his voice dripping menace. We're not done playing. His boots stormed out, the door slamming, an engine roaring to life. I waited until the sound faded, then exhaled, trembling. I knew my window was narrow. I ran downstairs, grabbed my keys, and raced to my car, hands shaking as I started the engine. The mountain road blurred as I sped away, my mind a storm. I couldn't trust local police. What if he had ties there? I needed distance, safety. I drove for hours, checking my mirrors for pursuit, stopping only when I crossed state lines at a rest area. Exhaustion hit, and with it, the full weight of violation. I broke down, sobbing in the driver's seat, the journal a leaden weight beside me. When I could think again, I drove to the nearest FBI office, handing over the journal, the photos I'd snapped of the cameras, and my story. I watched the agents' faces harden. They promised a thorough investigation. Weeks later, the truth emerged. The man, whose name I never learned, had run this sick game for years, rigging dozens of cabins, watching hundreds of guests. Some he merely observed, others, the agent's grim silences implied worse. My evidence helped trap him, but the victory was hollow. I couldn't stay in my apartment after that, every corner hiding imagined lenses. I moved to a new city, started fresh, but the fear lingered. Nightmares of blinking lights, cold sweats waking me to check the locks. I avoid rentals now, staying only where I control the space. That gut feeling, that whisper of wrongness, I heed it like gospel. The cabin taught me the world's sharp edges, but also my own strength. I survived, fought back, reclaimed my life. If you're ever in a strange place and something feels off, don't silence that instinct. The prettiest havens can hide the ugliest truths, and in the game of hunter and hunted, it's better to be the one who runs first. When the first scream pierced the night from the apartment next door, I convinced myself it was just a loud movie. By the third night, the truth was undeniable. I was living beside a predator, and the horror I'd uncover would reach depths I couldn't have imagined. I'd only been in my new place on Juniper Street for a week when it began. The building was a faded relic, its brick walls chipped and its pipes groaning, but it fit my fledgling graphic designer's budget. My neighbor, a middle-aged man named Harold, had seemed harmless enough when I moved in. He'd lugged a few boxes up the stairs for me, his smile broad but oddly flat, like a mask that didn't fit. "Welcome to the block," he'd said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "You'll settle in fine." Those words would echo later, heavy with irony. It was a Wednesday night when the first sound jolted me. A muffled cry, sharp and fleeting, yanked me from sleep. I sat up, heart thudding, straining to hear more, but only silence followed. I told myself it was a dream, or maybe a neighbor's TV left blaring. I drifted back to sleep, uneasy but unwilling to dwell. The next night it happened again, unmistakable this time. A scream laced with terror, cut off abruptly. I pressed my ear to the wall, catching faint shuffles, a dull thud, then nothing. My hand hovered over my phone, 911 half dialed, but doubt stopped me. What would I say? That I heard a noise? That Harold might be up to something? It felt absurd in the quiet dark. I erased the numbers, promising to talk to him tomorrow. Maybe he was having bad dreams. In the morning, Harold passed me in the hall, nodding with that same empty smile. I opened my mouth to ask about the noises, but the words stuck, his normalcy disarming. What if I was wrong? That night I stayed awake, ears primed. Around 2 a.m., it wasn't a scream but a series of thumps, like something heavy dragged across wood, followed by a door's sharp slam. I crept to my window, peering through the blinds. Harold was loading a bulky shape into his car's trunk under the street lamp's glow. In the dim light, I swore I saw a limp hand dangling from the bundle. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't imagination. This was real. I called the police, my voice trembling as I described what I'd seen. They promised a patrol, but I heard the skepticism in the dispatcher's tone. By the time they arrived, Harold's car was gone. The officers knocked on his door. no answer. They questioned me, but without hard evidence, their hands were tied. Call if you see more, they said, leaving me to a sleepless night, every creak a threat, every shadow a monster. I started digging online, searching for Harold's past, but he was a cipher. No social media, no records beyond a utility bill, a ghost in plain sight. A week passed, quiet but tense. I began to wonder if I'd misread it all, if stress had conjured horrors. Then it happened again, louder, more desperate, a scream not from Harold's apartment, but from the unit above mine. My heart pounded as I raced upstairs, the door ajar. I pushed it open, calling as shaky, "Is anyone okay?" The sight inside seared into me. An empty room, floors draped in plastic sheeting, and Harold standing over a young woman bound to a chair, a knife gleaming in his hand. His eyes widened in shock. Hers pleaded with desperate hope. Time stopped, then shattered. Harold lunged. I didn't decide to fight. It just happened. I grappled with him, the knife flashing inches from my throat. We crashed into walls, toppling a lamp, my adrenaline a wildfire. I drove my knee into his groin, and he doubled over, gasping. Grabbing the fallen lamp, I swung, the base cracking against his skull. He dropped, limp, panting. I ran to the woman fumbling with her ropes. "Run!" I gasped. "Call the police!" She bolted, her footsteps echoing down the stairs. I turned to secure Harold, but he was gone, a trail of blood leading to the open window. I rushed over, catching a glimpse of him vanishing down the fire escape. The police arrived minutes later, but Harold had slipped away. What followed was a nightmare unraveling. 3 other apartments in the building, rented under false names, were staged like the one upstairs. Plastic, restraints, tools for unspeakable acts. Harold wasn't Harold, but Raymond Voss, a fugitive linked to vanishings across 4 states. The woman I'd saved was his latest target, one of many. The weeks revealed more. Bodies unearthed in nearby woods, grim relics hidden in his walls, recordings the detectives couldn't speak of without flinching. I couldn't stay in that apartment. Every creak a reminder of that night. I moved to a friend's, then a new place, secure and bright, but the fear clung. Voss was caught months later, trying to cross into Mexico. The trial was a media frenzy, my testimony a reliving of that horror, his blank stare in court a chilling echo. He's locked away for life, but safety feels fragile. How many others hide behind neighborly nods? I've rebuilt a fortified apartment, therapy for the PTSD, locks checked obsessively. I wake to imagined screams, my pulse racing, but I don't ignore the unease anymore. I share this to warn, evil can wear a familiar face. Offer a helping hand. If you hear a cry in the night, don't turn over and sleep, act. The line between bystander and savior is thin, and the monster next door might be closer than you think. When an unmarked van rolled silently to the loading dock at 3 a.m., its shadowed bulk stark against the fluorescent glow, I sensed a fracture in the night's routine. I had no idea my mundane security shift was about to plunge me into a deadly race to unveil a secret that pulsed far beyond the office walls. I'd been a night guard at Vantage Tech for 8 months, a job so dull it was practically meditative. The paycheck kept my rent paid, and I liked the solitude. Empty corridors, the hum of servers, the occasional janitor's shuffle. Most nights I patrolled, checked locks, and fought the lull of boredom. That night started no different. I clocked in at 11 p.m., swapped nods with the day shift guard, and began my rounds. The labs were sealed, the data centers humming, everything in order. It was during my 3 a.m. sweep that the world tilted. A soft thud echoed from the back lot, followed by the low growl of an engine. Deliveries didn't come this late, and all Vantage Tech vehicles bore the company's sleek logo. This was something else. I crept to a window overlooking the loading dock, staying low. A white van idled, unmarked, its doors open. Four men emerged from the shadows, clad in plain jumpsuits, moving with a coiled efficiency that set my nerves on edge. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, unloading crates, sleek, black, unlabeled. My pulse quickened. Every item at Vantage Tech was cataloged, barcoded, tracked. These were ghosts meant to slip through unseen. I should have walked away, finished my rounds, and stayed ignorant. But curiosity, sharp and reckless, held me there. The men worked fast, stacking crates inside the dock. Then one slipped, a crate hitting the concrete with a crack, its lid jarring loose. In the dim light, I glimpsed a glint. Circuitry, wires, something that looked like a high-tech weapon. My breath hitched. This wasn't just contraband, it was a conspiracy, woven into the heart of Vantage Tech. I needed to act, to call it in, but my radio felt like a trap. What if security was involved? I had to get to a phone, alert someone outside. As I turned, my boots scuffed a metal grate, the sound sharp in the quiet. The men froze, heads snapping toward the window. "Someone's there!" one hissed. Panic surged. I ran, my footsteps echoing, sprinting for the main office where a landline waited. Boots pounded behind, voices barking orders. "Find them now. No witnesses." I ducked into a lab, its sterile glow a faint shield, and spotted a laptop still on, its screen open to a folder labeled Project Obsidian. Curiosity overrode fear for a moment. I scrolled. Schematics for advanced drones, bank transfers to offshore accounts, a list of names. Senators, CEOs, generals with notes on their leverage points. This was no small scam. Vantage Tech was a nexus of power and betrayal. Footsteps closed in. I spotted a USB drive on the desk and copied the files. The progress bar crawling as the door rattled. The transfer finished just as the lock gave. I yanked the drive and dove under the desk, hard hammering. The men stormed in, flashlights slicing the dark. "Check everywhere," one growled. They were here. I held my breath, sweat beading as they tore through the lab. After an agonizing wait, they moved on. I crawled out, legs trembling, and bolted for the security office, locking myself in. My hands shook as I fumbled for a plan. The police might be compromised. Vantage Tech had deep ties. I needed an outsider. Months back, a reporter, Lena Voss, had poked around, asking about Vantage Tech's defense contracts. The company had stonewalled her, but she'd seemed hungry for truth. I pulled up her news site on my phone, found her email, and sent a message with key files attached, my fingers clumsy with haste. A fist pounded the door. "Open it! We know you're in there!" I scanned the room, desperate. A vent grill caught my eye, tight but possible. I pried it open and squeezed inside just as the door splintered. From the vent, I saw them storm the office, one cursing at the computer. "They sent something. Check the email logs." My stomach dropped. They'd know I'd contacted Voss. I had to warn her. I crawled through the ducts, the metal cold and claustrophobic. My memory of the building's layout, my only guide. After what felt like hours, I emerged in an empty conference room on the 4th floor. Voices echoed in the hall, closing in. The window was my only shot. I smashed it with a chair, glass shattering, and climbed onto the ledge, the ground dizzyingly far below. My car gleamed in the lot, if I could reach it. I edged along the ledge, wind tugging at me, until I reached a drain pipe. Gripping it, I slid down, the metal biting my palms. Halfway, it groaned, then tore free. I fell, crashing onto a dumpster, pain exploding through me. Adrenaline pushed me up, and I limped to my car, shouts ringing behind. I peeled out, the van roaring after me. The chase was a blur of neon and asphalt, weaving through pre-dawn streets. I lost them in a construction maze, dodging cranes and pits, my heart in my throat. When I was sure they were gone, I drove to the newspaper's office, needing to ensure Voss got my message and understood the danger. The weeks that followed were chaos. FBI probes, police interviews, headlines screaming of corruption. The files I'd sent exposed a sprawling network, illegal arms deals, political blackmail, corporate collusion. Vantage Tech crumbled. Arrests rippled through elite circles. But the true architects stayed shadows, untouchable. I was called a whistleblower, a hero, but the cost was steep. 3 months later, a car nearly ran me off the road, an attempt on my life. I've been in witness protection since, never lingering, always watching. I question if I did right, if truth was worth my peace. But then I recall those crates, those names, the stakes, and I know I had no choice. If you're ever on a quiet shift and see something off, don't dismiss it. The smallest crack can reveal a chasm, and you might be the only one to shine a light. Just know the shadows fight back, and once you step into their game, they'll hunt you forever. When the first scream tore through the wall from the apartment next door, I chalked it up to a neighbor's horror flick turned too loud. By the third night, the chilling truth sank in. I was sharing a wall with a monster, and the horrors I'd uncover would plunge me into a nightmare far deeper than I could have dreamed. I'd been in my new apartment on Willow Avenue for barely a week when it started. The building was a tired old thing, its plaster cracked, its floors creaking, but it was all my barista's salary could stretch to. My neighbor, a quiet man named Carl, had seemed friendly enough when I moved in. He'd helped hoist my mattress up the narrow stairs, his handshake firm, his smile a touch too stiff, like it was painted on. "Glad to have you here," he'd said, his gaze sliding past mine. "You'll like it." Those words would later feel like a cruel jest. It was a Tuesday night when the first cry jolted me awake. A sharp, muffled wail, gone as quickly as it came. I lay still, pulse racing, ears straining, but the night was silent again. I told myself it was a nightmare, or maybe someone's late-night TV. I drifted back to sleep, a nagging unease lingering. The next night it returned, unmistakable. A scream, raw with fear, cut off mid-breath. I pressed my ear to the wall, catching faint scuffles, a heavy thud, then nothing. My fingers hovered over my phone, 911 ready, but doubt crept in. What could I tell them? That I heard a noise? That Carl might be trouble? It seemed flimsy in the dark. I backed off, vowing to confront him in the morning. Maybe he was just prone to vivid dreams. Come daylight, Carl passed me in the stairwell, offering a curt nod, his face as bland as ever. I meant to ask about the sounds, but his normalcy disarmed me, the question dying on my lips. What if I'd misheard? That night, I stayed up senses sharp. Around 2 a.m., no scream came, but a series of dull thumps, like a sack dragged across wood, ended with a door's sharp bang. I slipped to my window, peering through the slats. Carl was shoving a large, awkward bundle into his sedan's trunk under the streetlight's haze. In the flickering glow, I glimpsed what looked like a pale hand, slack and dangling. My stomach dropped. This was no mistake. This was something evil. I called the police, my voice shaking as I recounted the sight. They promised to send a unit, but I could sense their skepticism through the line. When they arrived, Carl's car was gone. They knocked on his door, no response. They took my statement, but without proof, their hands were tied. "Call again if you see more," they said, leaving me to a night of dread. Every creak a threat, every shadow a lurking terror. I dug into Carl online, searching for any trace, but he was a blank slate. No profiles, no history beyond a parking ticket, a phantom in plain sight. A week passed, eerily quiet. I started to question myself, wondering if stress had spun a fiction. Then it struck again, a scream so piercing it wasn't from Carl's place, but from the apartment above mine. My heart thundered as I raced upstairs, finding the door slightly open. I called out, "Is everyone all right?" and pushed inside. The scene was a waking nightmare. A bare room, floors draped in plastic, and Carl looming over a young woman tied to a chair, a blade glinting in his grip. His eyes widened in shock. Hers shone with desperate hope. Time halted, then fractured. Carl charged. I didn't choose to fight. It was instinct. I grappled with him, the knife grazing my arm, warm blood seeping. We slammed into walls, a vase shattering, my fear a roaring furnace. I drove my elbow into his ribs and he staggered. Seizing a metal bookend, I swung, cracking his temple. He collapsed, groaning, gasping. I freed the woman, her wrists raw from ropes. "Go!" I urged. "Get help!" She fled, her steps pounding down the stairs. I turned to restrain Carl, but he was gone, a blood trail snaking to the window. I rushed over, catching his silhouette vanishing down the fire escape. Police swarmed the building minutes later, but Carl had melted into the night. The investigation peeled back a gruesome truth. 4 other apartments, leased under aliases, were rigged like the one upstairs. Plastic, tools, spaces for horrors unspoken. Carl was no Carl, but Leonard Holt, wanted for a trail of disappearances across 3 states. The woman I'd saved was one of many. Her survival a rare crack in his pattern. The weeks that followed revealed more. Shallow graves in nearby marshes, keepsakes stashed in his apartment's walls, videos the detective spoke of in hushed, haunted tones. I couldn't stay in that building, every sound a ghost of that night. I crashed with a friend and found a new place, secure and far away. But the fear was a stubborn stain. Holt was caught weeks later, nabbed at a border checkpoint. The trial was a media storm, my testimony a raw reliving of that night. His cold eyes in court a reminder of my brush with death. He's caged for life, no parole, but safety feels like a brittle promise. How many others lurk behind neighborly facades? I've rebuilt a fortified home, therapy to untangle the anxiety, locks checked with ritual precision. I wake to phantom cries, my heart racing, but I trust my instincts now. I share this to caution. Evil can smile, carry your boxes, blend into the everyday. If you hear a sound that chills you, don't dismiss it, act. The difference between life and death, between saving or losing, might be your willingness to see the darkness next door. As the unmarked crates vanished into the shadowed maw of the warehouse at 2 a.m., a chill settled in my bones, whispering that I'd glimpsed something forbidden. I couldn't yet know that my routine night shift at Vantage Point Industries would ignite a desperate struggle to expose a conspiracy that wove through the highest echelons of power. I'd been a security guard at Vantage Point for 6 months, a gig so repetitive it dulled the mind. The pay kept my lights on, and I found a strange comfort in the quiet. Empty hallways, the soft buzz of overhead lights, the occasional hum of machinery. Most nights I walked my rounds, checked keypads, and scrolled through my phone to stay awake. That night felt no different at first. I punched in at 10 p.m., gave a nod to the day guard as he left, and started my patrol. The research wings were locked, the server banks secure, everything as it should be. It was during my 2 a.m. loop that the air turned heavy. A low rumble echoed from the loading bay, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. No deliveries were slated for this hour, and Vantage Point's trucks always bore the company's stark logo. This was something else. I edged to a window overlooking the bay, keeping to the dark. A black van idled, its sides blank, no markings to betray its purpose. 3 men slipped out, dressed in nondescript coveralls, their movements sharp and practiced. They spoke in low, clipped tones, unloading crates, smooth, metallic, devoid of labels. My heart kicked up a notch. Every shipment here was documented, scanned, tracked. These crates were phantoms, meant to pass unseen. I should have turned back, logged my rounds, and stayed blind. But a nagging instinct held me, eyes locked on the men as they shuttled their cargo into the warehouse. Then a crate slipped, hitting the pavement with a clang, its seam splitting. In the faint glow of the dock lights, I saw a gleam. Circuitry, a sleek barrel, unmistakably a weapon. My breath caught. This wasn't mere smuggling, it was a secret operation, and Vantage Point was its heart. I needed to report it, to get word out, but my radio felt like a snare. What if the security team was in on it? I had to reach a phone, someone beyond these walls. As I stepped back, my flashlight grazed a metal rack, the clatter ringing out like a siren. The men froze, heads snapping toward the window. "Who's there?" one barked. Panic surged. I ran, my boots pounding the tiled floor, aiming for the admin office where a landline waited. Shouts followed, footsteps closing in. "Find them!" No one leaves. I ducked into a lab, its sterile hum a fleeting refuge, and spotted a laptop, its screen still glowing. The desktop was open to a folder labeled Project Eclipse. Fear warred with curiosity, and I clicked. Files spilled out. Blueprints for autonomous drones, ledgers of untraceable payments, a dossier of names. Politicians, military brass, corporate titans with notes on their vulnerabilities. Vantage Point wasn't just a tech firm. It was a nerve center for something vast and sinister. The door rattled, voices nearing. I grabbed a USB drive from the desk and started copying files, the bar inching forward as boots echoed closer. The transfer finished as the lock gave way. I yanked the drive and slid under a workbench, my pulse deafening. The men burst in, flashlights slashing the dark. "They were here," one growled. "Search every inch." I pressed against the cold metal, barely breathing, as they tore through the lab. After an eternity, they moved on. I crawled out, legs like jelly, and sprinted for the security office, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I weighed my options. The police might be bought. Vantage Point's influence ran deep. I needed an outsider. A journalist, Mara Klein, had sniffed around months ago, probing the company's government deals. Vantage Point had shut her down, but she'd seemed relentless. I found her outlet site on my phone, typed a frantic email, and attached the files, hitting send as a fist hammered the door. "Open up! We know you're inside!" a voice roared. I scanned the room, desperate. A vent cover gleamed above the desk, narrow but my only shot. I pried it loose and squeezed in as the door buckled. From the vent, I saw them storm the office, one cursing at the computer. "They sent something! Pull the logs!" My heart sank. They traced the email to Klein. I had to warn her. I crawled through the ducts, the metal biting my skin, navigating by memory of the building's maze. After what seemed like hours, I emerged in an empty boardroom on the 5th floor. Voices echoed outside, closing in. The window was my last hope. I smashed it with a chair, glass raining down, and stepped onto the ledge. The ground a dizzying drop below. My truck sat in the lot, if I could make it. I inched along the ledge, wine clawing at me until I reached a conduit pipe. I gripped it, sliding down, the rough steel tearing my hands. Halfway it ground.